And there's been a lot of great. So I'll shut up now. There's been a lot of great energy today, a lot of excitement, and a lot of reminders that we're just a terrific family, and with a great legacy and a great future. And picking the next artistic director is a big part of that. So our first finalist is Ben Steinfeld, who's right here. Many of you have met him today. Ben is a graduate of Brown, and he was in the first graduating class of the MFA program. He is the artistic director of a company called Fiasco in New York, and very accomplished. And we're delighted and appreciative that he's chosen Trinity, and he would like to lead us. So I'm going to moderate the discussion after. Ben has a prompt that you've all seen if you're reading your emails, and he's going to take us through. He's going to take us through that. There have been so many of them. He's going to take us through that. And then we'll just have questions based on what he presents to us. And we have, I think, about an hour overall. Yeah. Yeah. So he's going to present for 20 minutes or half hour, and then we'll have a discussion. And I'll moderate that discussion. Ready? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Ben.
Hi. It's so good to see you. I've seen so many of you throughout the day in different contexts. I can't thank you for what you've done today. People keep saying, "Are you all right?" It's so exhausting. And I'm sure it's much more exhausting for all of you, honestly, to have to listen to me say the same metaphors over and over again and tell some of the same stories and stuff. So I just appreciate how much you've done. Thank the media, Kibby in particular, for last night and for welcoming me so warmly and being so helpful. It's just been a really exciting day. So I feel very honored to get to share some thoughts with you. My job is to share with you some ideas for what might be three seasons of programming might look like. I want to be really clear about a couple things. One is that these may not be the right ideas, but I think they are the kinds of plays that live in the categories that I want you to be thinking of. So this for me is really about providing examples of the sort of big buckets of shows that I think will tell the story we want to be telling, provide our audiences with the experience we want to provide them with, and give our artists and staff stuff that's going to sort of galvanize their participation over the next few years. So I'm not saying what we're going to do in like November of 29. I'm just sort of saying like in the next 3 years, I think we should do shows that live in this category. And here's 3 examples of what that could be. Knowing that we have, I think it's safe to say, no idea where we will be in 5 minutes, let alone 2 or 3 years from now. And we need to be responsive to what feels like it makes sense to us then. And that could be quite different. So I just wanted to understand, have everybody understand how I've been thinking about this and acknowledge that. What I'm going to talk about today is really about the stuff that gets me out of bed when it comes to theater, which is stuff that is joyful, where the pleasure of choosing it and choosing to do it, and that this is actually what we do for fun, is central to everything that we do. And also, I hope is just sort of reverberating in all the halls of that and spaces of that new building, that everyone is encouraged to bring and find and release and share the joy of what being in this profession is about for them, and their contribution is recognized and named joyfully. It's got to thrill you. If I was Hal Prince, I'd put the glasses on the head and say, it's supposed to be unlike the experience you're having on the street. And that holds up. It's got to do something for you. It's got to be exciting. It's got to, the kind of confrontation with the audience that Adrian founded the theater on is something I'm going to talk about in my own way, but that has to be at the center of the idea that doing plays is a big deal. It's not no big deal. It is a big ass deal to get up in front of people and tell stories, and we have to know that it is. We have to decide that it is, and we have to choose shows that demand that it becomes thrilling, unpredictable, exciting, and dynamic to experience theater at Trinity Rep. And the most important thing is to have a sense of audaciousness, of audacity. As a very different president once said, the audacity of hope. That really, the idea that we can do any of this is audacious. And I'll talk about that more in a second. May we go to the next slide? Yes. All right. I know it can be, one of my dad's pet peeves is when people read things to you that you've been handed. So I'm now going to go ahead and do that anyway, because I don't know if you can see it. The theater occurs when the actor confronts the audience, and through this confrontation, the door to the imagination of the audience is opened, and the actor enters. It is something entertaining, sometimes challenging, and almost always emotionally and psychologically engaging. Both audience and actor must participate. It is an event full of risk and mystery and danger, for, at its best, it can change our souls. That's Adrian Hall. I think that everybody in this room knows it's true. I think that everybody in this room has had their soul changed by theater. And that's why we're trying so hard to figure out how to keep doing it in the place where the founding notion is that that's possible. And that the place where that happens is the interaction between the actor and the audience. And that can show up in a million different ways. It can. But you can't do it without knowing how meaningful that interaction is, and without the audience being an essential participant in that imaginative leap. We have to give them room to get involved, and we've got to find a way to invite them in. And Trinity's been doing that for a very long time, and part of what I want to do is just try to explain my version of how we might go about doing that. I'm going to just tell you a few other things that I think are pretty audacious, and I'm sorry, I have to refer to multiple devices here for put my face in front of it so it opens. There is something audacious about believing that theater can change your soul, except that's what it's designed to do. There is something audacious about thinking that you could have world-class theater in Providence, Rhode Island. That's pretty audacious. It's pretty audacious to think that centering a theater around a resident acting company could be as innovative and revolutionary as it is ancient. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's pretty audacious to think that you could create an entire aesthetic point of view about how to do plays just by trying to figure out how to get the Project Discovery kids to not rip the seats out of the theater. How do you compel their attention? And then to figure out through a collaboration with directing and design and acting, how that might become a guiding principle for the next 50 years. That those people are your teachers. It's the audacity to think that you could take a mom and pop graduate program and transform it into a nationally recognized MFA program with award-winning graduates. But they did it here. That happened here. It's the audacity of Oscar, you've heard me say the story a few times today, walking into my class up the hill when I was an undergraduate and saying, theater and democracy were invented in the same place in the same decade. And he believes that. And I wanted to figure out what he was talking about, so I decided I wanted to follow him around and figure out how to make people want to run through walls to make that true. It is very audacious for Paula Vogel to have looked at all of us who were in the first class of the Brown Trinity MFA program and declared, after taking us all in, that the future of the American theater was in that room. That's audacious. It's pretty audacious that over here in this other room, Brian McElhaney was able to reveal to us, to prove to us, that your rehearsal technique is in fact your acting technique. That what all of us in the theater are trying to do actually is to learn how to rehearse and to create an ethos and an aesthetic that's based on saying, how do we invite the audience into that? How do we rehearse in front of an audience and then sell tickets and call that a performance? How are we always learning and discovering what the play is? So audacity is at the core of everything that Trinity has done, I think, over its history that's made it successful. And the reason that those things have worked is because the people who were implementing that audacious vision had the skill and the talent and the belief and the ability to collaborate with everybody around them, to inspire them to care about that, and to make it happen. So it's one thing to talk about it and to articulate it, but you've got to have the goods. You've got to be able to deliver on that promise. Sometimes it won't happen. Sometimes we will fail in our effort to do that, and then we'll go back. And the great thing about being a theater company is you get to do it again. You get to try again. So, but that's why I'm here today, and that's why I want to come back here, is because I want to be the next person that helps move that legacy of audacity forward. So what I'm going to do is show you some categories of shows that I think would help us do that. There's a level of audacity in thinking that Trinity could do them. But it's undergirded by the belief that a lot of this lines up with the strategic plan, which I've had the privilege of getting to look at and think about, and how the different pillars of those goals all work. Thank you.
Sorry.
You read my mind.
Okay.
So,
Trying
the
to
pillars of a new era. Our programming is going to be built around 4 categories that are designed to maximize artistic excellence. These are the things that are in the strategic plan, in case you don't know that. Maximize artistic excellence, audience engagement and attendance, institutional strength, and company investment over the next few years. Okay, that's the goal of what we're doing. So in order to do that, there's a few pillars of policy and of programming that I would approach. One is to make our programming a really big tent, to think about how many different kinds of ways we can be inviting people in. Right now, I'm going to start by talking about musicals and epics, because that's the most audacious stuff you can do. It's the biggest, it's the most expensive, cover your ears. And it's the thing that I think will distinguish us the most in the region. The sort of only at Trinity-ness of what we want to do. The other thing is a lab that's going to create a middle space for us to have works in progress being ongoing all the time. Because artistically, I really believe that you only find out whether something is worth working on by working on it. Yeah. I've said before that there are a couple of previous artistic directors at this institution who have boasted proudly about never having had an office while they were in charge. And while I'm not sure that that's the best plan for 2025 and the administrative responsibilities that the job includes, I do think there's something to learn from that, which is that the best thing you can be doing as an artistic director is to be making things all the time, to be in rehearsal, to be in workshop, to be in meetings with the board, to be in fundraising strategy conversations, to be in marketing conversations, to be doing anything but sitting around by yourself trying to come up with good ideas, but to be a fundamentally collaborative leader and collaborative animal, which is what I am, and to say, we're going to find out what we're doing by getting information, by doing it, and by sharing it, and not keeping secrets about that. The third thing is about building some meaningful partnerships. And this is about collaboration and reputation. We need to have people coming into the building who aren't already here to support and engage the work of our resident company and let us all re-smell the flower and get some new ideas about how we might move forward, both in terms of professional development and also in terms of the partners we produce with. But those people have to be hip to ensemble. They've got to want to work inside of the parameters of this dynamic, not so that it hems them in, but so that they see what the opportunity is to collaborate in this kind of way with an ongoing group of resident artists. And we also need people who are going to help bring attention and burnish the national reputation of Trinity in a way that will make it seem like what we're doing here is actually very as important as it is. And that's part of my job too, is to figure out how to get that conversation going at the national level. And my plan is to do that through all of the different relationships and partnerships that I have, and also to try to tell a sort of specific story about our region, which I'll get to later. And then finally, we also have to think about the legacy of this place, not only what's behind us, but what's coming. And sorry, I worked with a designer, I'll confess, I worked with a designer to help me put this together. And his original graphic for this was a piece of plumbing, because it was about like a pipeline. Looked very much like the trap of a toilet. It's like, can we come up with something else for that particular image? So it could have just made an actual tent. So we've got the ladder now, which I think is a little more optimistic. It goes in both directions. But the legacy is part of getting other people radicalized into the audaciousness of how they can imagine their own artistic lives in the theater, and we build a training program that Trinity has in-house that is not dependent on other institutions and lets us kind of replenish the casting pool that will go missing with the loss of the Brown Trinity program, which has been relied on for years to provide young people to play parts on the main stage. And also I have some thoughts about how this connects to the reputation question. And then also a fundamentally optimistic belief that there will be more people who are going to want to know the things that we know. And that just as people taught them to us, we have a responsibility, a joyful responsibility, to teach them how to do it. And I love teaching. It's not plan B for me. It's a big part of what I do. I've been very lucky to get to do it here and at NYU and elsewhere and at Bread Loaf and in all different kinds of contexts. And one of the things that I really believe to be true that I also learned here is that fundamentally acting and directing and teaching are all the same practice. We have so many brilliant teachers in this room who know that in every context, you're standing up in front of people, the actor in the audience, the director, the collaborators, the teacher, the students, and you're trying to find ways to let the things that you care about become things that they can care about too. And so I think we have to become a teaching theater again, and we have to be optimistic that there are, in fact, young people we have yet to meet who still would be beside themselves to get to spend a year working and learning and training here. And we're going to figure out how to do that. Everything goes to sleep now. Okay. Can we go to the next slide?
I did.
Oh my God.
That's all right.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna start with some musicals because I love them. And because I think Trinity's tradition of working on musicals is so unique and we should figure out how to keep doing that. So these are musicals that are joyful and moving. They have multi-generational appeal and casting, which I think is really important. We need people to bring their children to Trinity. We need to sell 3 tickets for every 1 ticket we think we can sell. And kids don't go to the theater alone. So there has to be some kind of multi-generational appeal to these. They have to have enough name recognition to be an event in and of themselves, regardless of how we do them, even though we're gonna do them in a very cool way. And they have to be open to inventive concepts and design that allow us to take advantage of the things that we can do in the new Chase Theater. So here's a few ideas of what that could be. Some of these shows I know really well, some of them I know less well. They're in the ballpark of where we want to be. So that's Come From Away, The Secret Garden, which is a totally underrated show with an absolutely thrilling score, and Fiddler on the Roof. I was surprised that Trinity hasn't done Fiddler yet. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think we should continue to look for some golden age shows that make sense to do here, because some might not. But I think this could be interesting. I want to say that everything I'm proposing has the currently constituted company in front of mind. So I'm actually able to project myself into seeing how we could use the current resident company in everything that I'm going to be talking about, and how to supplement the company with the proper people who are at their level to help fill out these proposals. Oh, yeah. I'll get to that later. I just want to say 50% of the authors that I'm listing here are women, which is very unusual for musical theater, and we should be front-loading that as a priority. This is, and now we get to the epics, okay? These are ambitious, audacious, actor-driven stuff. This is the stuff that turned me on at Trinity when I saw the Cider House Rules, I think was the first show I ever saw at Trinity, and I didn't know what had just taken place. I didn't know how to process something that was that large and that brave and that moving and that bold. So these are big casts. They're big stories. They are big stories. And most importantly to me, they have big ideas in them. They are demanding a level of engagement with ideas that are complicated and that are going to really enrich the public square, not by telling people things that we think we already know and proving how much we know and the audience doesn't, but by asking questions that no one can claim to have a full answer about. Oh, wait. Okay. So these are actor-driven, they're audacious, they're ambitious, they're reinforcing the message that this work can only be seen in Trinity, in this region. And I would say maybe anywhere. So that's plays like August Osage County by Tracy Letts. I mean, that would tear the roof off of this place if we did it with our company. It would be insane. Lots of parts for people of a certain age. It's great. I'm the same age as everybody I'm talking about. There's a play called Oslo by J.T. Rogers, which would be risky for a number of reasons, but it's really thrilling. And I want to show, part of the reason I'm choosing these plays is because they were all written in the last 20 years. And I think it's really important to show that the sort of like big, bold, big language-based, idea-based storytelling that has massive opportunities for design and stuff doesn't only live in like Dickens and before. Like there are writers who are still interested in that kind of scope that give us multiple aesthetic modalities and language modalities and storytelling stuff of getting in there. And then there's something really crazy. It would be something like The Coast of Utopia, which is a trilogy about a bunch of people nobody's ever heard of, but is incredibly fascinating and gives us the chance to prove. Also, Trinity hasn't produced a play by Tom Stoppard since the 1980s. which I was just surprised by because he died recently, so I was looking at that specifically. And maybe that's not the right answer, but if we worked our way up to by year 3, being able to have an audience that we knew would come to a three-play cycle with a big cast and a lot of challenging content and a thrilling sense of sweep and ideas, I'd be pretty fired up about that. Yeah, August Osage County, in addition to being a just sort of searing family drama, gives us a chance to really engage some questions around Indigenous erasure. And Oslo is about the backdoor diplomatic negotiations that led to the Oslo Peace Accords in '93 between the Israelis and the PLO. And those kinds of conversations are in the public square these days. And it might be interesting to not shy away from looking at moments of hope as and an understanding that there are harder problems to figure out than what plays to pick for next year.
Mm.
I think we could maybe get Reed and White House to cover that too, yeah? We've got some heavy hitters in Congress. We've got some serious fucking people there who are amazing. What would get them excited to come hang out with us and talk about stuff? Here's something that's very important to me. I went back and looked at the programming, and in the past several years, my blunt assessment would be there's absolutely nothing that you would think to bring your kids to. So the musicals are one version of that, but we don't want to be too dependent on that. I want to have multiple chances throughout the season, obviously including Christmas Carol, where it's very clear that the goal is for young people to be in the building. You can feel how that changes everything. It's not only an important part of our legacy with Project Discovery creating the whole way we people decided to do stuff here, but it also means that we're saying, as the State Theater of Rhode Island, I think we have a mandate to sort of say we're going to be with you at every stage of your life, and you can start coming to Trinity as a family anytime. So these are exciting shows for family audiences, and also we need to prove that kids need great art. They need the best stuff. The best stuff for kids is always actually very good. It's not just good for kids, it's actually very good. And I think this would galvanize the education and community departments to really have multiple ways of getting access to students that we're not giving them enough chances to reach right now, except through classes. So these are exciting shows for family audiences that prove that the State Theater of Rhode Island can be your home for you at every stage of your life.
I think you should describe a little bit 12 kinds of eyes.
Oh, I will, sure, yeah. This man.
I just think I know that.
Well, for example, here's a tie into something I was talking about. So there's a fun family musical called Barrio Girl with 3 R's by Chiara Allegria Cuties. Does everybody know Chiara? She went here. She was in my class. She's better known now as a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and the author of the book of In the Heights, the musical In the Heights. But we once played a set together at Cafe Zop, which we want that to go unnoticed. I'm sure she would answer the phone. But this was developed at the Kennedy Center and the Random Children's Theater. Our friend Rick Dildine just directed a cool adaptation of Treasure Island at the Children's Theater in Minneapolis. And that made me think about my adaptation of a children's book that I wrote called 12 Kinds of Ice, which is a musical about winter, which is meant to be paired as a downstairs piece of programming in relationship to Christmas Carol. And it's a two-hander and it's affordable. Okay. All these would be amazing for the company. And again, there's so many more avenues to pursue of how we might create this material ourselves and adapt this material ourselves. But it has to be a part of everything we're doing, I think, in the first few years to help sell 3 or 4 tickets for every 1 or 2 that the other ones allow us to do. So there is some strategery involved in one of the things that one of the things that Trinity has always done is these incredible adaptations. I mentioned the Cider House Rules. Here's a photo from Tom Jones. This is a little Bill Dom and Barbara Orson for those who celebrate. I think we need to keep choosing titles that are going to galvanize audiences and open up a wider dialogue in the public square. There are people who will know these books but don't know the plays that are in that first list I showed, or second list I showed, right? We've got to revitalize Trinity's trademark adaptations like All the King's Men, et cetera, right? And so I think there's a question of those can be homegrown. They can be commissioned from people who are already inside the artistic family. With what we've got, they can also come from outside, or there can be collaborations that do both. This is why we need a way of moving that work forward that doesn't just have somebody at the computer trying to help. One idea I had is to do a big sweeping adaptation of this book, which is called Sons of Providence, which is a book that was written about 20 years ago about John and Moses Brown. That's right, the Moses Brown of Brown University and Moses Brown School, two brothers who are on opposite sides of the transatlantic slave trade and opposite aspects of the story of the American Revolution. It made me kind of realize that you can study the world by studying Rhode Island. And I think we need to have a certain amount of patriotism and civic pride about how important Rhode Island is to American history in all directions. And so for me, this kind of thing is important because I'll just be completely honest and say that, like, it is okay to have things in our internal or outward facing language that talk about taking responsibility for the land that we stand on, taking responsibility for the history of how our state's economy got built. And that's all fine. I just don't know if audiences really receive that. I don't know what they make of that. I don't know what I make of it sometimes when I see it. What I know is that if we were willing to step into our public square and say, guess what? Here's a huge play that's going to ask you to really deal with that. And then we're able to get something going. And we're able to tie it into the schools, and we can get universities involved with all of this stuff. Through my work at Breadloaf, I've met some like pretty cool novelists who we have some friends of ours, people like Susan Choi and Rebecca Mackay, who are contemporary women writing extraordinary books, and they love theater, and they would be really fired up to have an adaptation or do an adaptation of one of their things. And people in this town love books. And they might come to see something that's based on a book that they've read or heard of. And of course, we have all kinds of tie-ins with the library and stuff like that. And then there's something that I know is already in development, a show like Animal Farm, which has so many extraordinary education and school partnership opportunities. I will force my son to revisit 8th grade and read it again whenever that gets produced, because we just missed it. But it really is extraordinary. And I think it gives us ways of bringing our stuff out into the community. And nobody else would do it. This is the stuff that only we would do. Let me see. Oh, yes, I just want to add, I think this is something that our older audiences, the sort of either real or hypothetical subscribers that we, I don't mean to put that in quotes, but I mean, sometimes it's just hard to know. When we say we need to rebuild our audience, sometimes we're talking about getting people back. We think we've lost. Sometimes we're talking about actually building a new group of people. So I just want to say that goes in both directions. But I think what I'll say is I think it's something that older audiences, not just demographic, I mean, not just in terms of age, but people who understand Trinity's history will find familiar and exciting, and it gives patrons a way in through something that they recognize, along with all the incredible programming and ancillary programming opportunities this has. Okay, speaking of the lab, we need a way, thank you, we need a way of working on stuff. This solves several different challenges at once. There is not enough information that is revealed by sitting around a table and reading a play. It's better than reading it silently, but it's not enough. We have to work on things to find out what we should keep working on. We need to figure out a financial structure that allows that to happen, and we need to figure out a way to do that that has actors on contract, not 29-hour stipends. It's a way of giving people weeks, and it helps address the challenges of figuring out how to get people enough weeks to keep up with the ever-moving goalposts of Equity's health insurance and a number of other challenges that it takes an actor to understand. So modeled on Fiasco's Successful Without a Net initiative, which I can tell you more about if you want, Trinity's got to have a way of utilizing our newly accessible spaces, yes, to share workshop productions of pieces that are in development, opening our process and building excitement for future seasons. One of the things that's revelatory about my work with Fiasco is you cannot believe how much people want to see things before they're ready. And this is a group of actors that understands how to do that, because what we do is process. What we do is we know how to rehearse. And if you're willing to rehearse in front of an audience, they could not care less if the hat doesn't work or if the script is not put down yet. What they want to see is the thrill, the alchemical thrill of something being made right in front of them. And to get some buy-in 6, 9, 12 months ahead of time and say, just wait till you see it in the chase. And then you also might be able to say, if you thought that was exciting, perhaps you'd like to underwrite the journey of that show so that it can have the band it deserves to have, or so that it can have the cast it deserves to have, right? And then you can start to cultivate people who are buying into the journey of something because they've gotten to be there at the birth. And this is also just, this also just gives me a chance to talk a little bit about how I think we should make stuff. So I really think that this is gonna allow us to learn what we're committing to by committing to it. Rather than by like poking it with a stick conceptually or hypothetically, it just doesn't work. It gives supporters a reason to champion specific projects, just talk about that. And it reveals to us the why and the how of a piece before a full production. I could not be getting more support for my upcoming production of Winter's Tale from everybody. Jennifer has been extraordinary. Every department has been so helpful, so Wensley, so proactive. The problem is everybody wants to know everything before we start. That model is really difficult because I can't answer every question before the people who are going to be doing the play have begun to breathe and speak and hear, and we develop a collective ensemble sense of what the play is about. So if those deadlines are not movable because of a whole series of other logistical and producerial problems that it's easy to say are no big deal, but are a big deal, then we need to start touching the material earlier so that there's real information flowing in the artistic community about how to answer some of those questions on time. Let's go to the next slide, please. What is that? Oh, yeah. So that's a lot of stuff that I think we can do ourselves with some cool visitors. But I think we can get even more specific. And each season, I would like to see a really, really strategic, key national, what I'm going to call a national collaboration. These are strategic partnerships that bring new aesthetics and new co-production models. We're going to need them all. Co-producing is a broad, broad term. It means about 1,000 different things, depending on what you're doing. I have a lot of experience with different models of this. There's presenting versus producing. There's co-producing when it just means you do it 2 places. There's co-producing that's pay to play. If you want it to happen, you got to kick in some money. It's so many different versions of that. This will give us a chance to try out lots of different models, broaden our network of artists and audiences, and bring national attention to what Trinity is doing, because these are people who start to do that. All of these people are people I've already collaborated with. So this is just the list of people I know are cool. There's all kinds of other possibilities that are going to get developed. But the key with all these people is that they all understand, where am I? They all understand how to make work as an ensemble and for and with an ensemble. And they all have the relationships and reputations to make the work at Trinity reach a broader world. So that's my theater company, Fiasco, which is inventive, actor-driven ensemble work that lives mostly in the classical world, but also now is doing new stuff and has done a couple of Sondheim shows. I think it might be great to bring our production of Into the Woods here. That hasn't been done since Oscar's production, and I think that could really be fun. Noisemaker Theatre is a writing duo from Scotland who are delightful, and they do really innovative musical storytelling. And then there's the Saunders Collective featured here. This was the group of 4 actors that was central to our production of The Comedy of Errors, who are absolute dynamo musical theater performers. And when they sing together, you're just like experiencing something from another place. And they're all multi-hyphenate creators and performers. They could easily come in and do something on their own. They could also collaborate with us in all kinds of different ways. And I think these kinds of partnerships are going to be really key for our ensemble to meet other performing ensembles and have some alchemy that can't be created by jobbing in individuals.
Yep.
People with history meet people with history, and then we talk about what that shared project is, and we identify how those strengths are going to reinforce each other, and we make something really electrifying. Let's go on. So who would I be interested in having direct and write and compose and act here? I'm going to just begin by talking about, the reason I wrote Brown and Trinity alumni is because we need to take advantage of the fact that a lot of the people who would add great value to our theater artistically and reputationally went to Brown, but didn't go to Brown Trinity. There are also people who went to the old Trinity Rep Conservatory who we would do very well to take advantage of. And then there are plenty of people who went to Brown Trinity as well. But I just wanted to name that I think that's a missed opportunity. It's something I think I can bring to the table in a unique way because I went to Brown as an undergrad, and these relationships are as real for me as the ones that with the people that I went to grad school with. And my recent experience participating in some events at Brown has reminded me of how many different kinds of resources and support are available when a Brown alum gets excited about something. It is a very enthusiastic, artistically oriented group of alumni who want to help see things happen and who care about this place. And our relationship with Brown is ongoing, at least financially for a while. And we've got to find ways of taking advantage of that and getting what we want from it. So this is a season. No, it's not. Ignore this. This is great. This is, these are some directors I think are pretty great. Some of them I know have obviously worked here already, but people like Liesl Tommy and Whitney White and Amanda Daynard. These are people who understand key aspects of Trinity's ethos in their bones and in their hearts, and they make stuff that is totally different, but doesn't deviate from the ethos. I was talking about this a little earlier today. The ethos is the important thing. The aesthetics are not the most important. The ethos of that actor-audience relationship and storytelling and big ideas and language can show up in a million different ways. It's okay to have electric guitars. It's okay to have makeup and costumes. That can work as long as the thing that you're really pursuing is about something direct. And I think it's important that directors have a different artistic point of view than me, but are not wrestling against the ethos of what Trinity's about. Some writers who are composers, people like Lynn Nottage, Sarah Rule, Kiara Hughes, I mentioned. Aaron McCune is a very cool composer-songwriter who's based in the region. Stephen Karam won the Tony Award for The Humans. And then actors like Miriam Silverman, John Douglas Thompson, maybe even Kate Burton. Don't freak out. But these are people who believe in this place and would want to help it and could headline something that would draw attention to the fact that it was happening. And we need some help with that. And there are also people who could integrate into the ensemble and do great stuff. I'm just doing this to show that without even departing from the people who graduated from Brown and Trinity in the last 20 years, without even exhausting that, and I had to take people off just so it would fit on the slide. There are so many ways that we can maximize the people who speak the language, but speak it in a different way. I think that's really, really important for these early years, that we're not sending too many different signals about who we are as we're trying to rebuild a specific point of view. To that end, the next piece of that legacy is about developing the next generation. It's very weird to be old enough to be talking about the next generation. I still think of myself as on the verge of starting. But I'm not. So I really want us to have a new in-house model of actor training that meets the moment. And by the way, ours is not the only MFA program to be closing. It's sad, it's painful, there are reasons why it happened, and it's also not all our fault. There are real questions about whether or not that model is going to make it. And if there's only 3 places that can do it, it's not actually a model. That's just reputation. And that's people thinking they're gonna get on TV if they go there. So that's a very different story. No shade, but
Yeah.
so we need a model of training that is fully responsive to what's going on right now, and it also brings energy into our renovated spaces. So what I want to create, and I know that there's ideas about this already, is a season-long audition-based performance and training apprenticeship, because most theaters are canceling theirs, and we're going to double down on ours because we know that theaters pass down lovingly from person to person, right? That's going to be for emerging actors and directors, that reestablishes Trinity as a teaching theater, that makes a case for young talent choosing Providence as a home base. I'll talk about that more in a second, and replaces the casting pool of young people that we need on a seasonal basis that's been left empty by the loss of a program. I've already said that teaching wasn't really plan B for me. It turns out to be a big part of who I am and what I care about, and I've articulated already how it's connected to my artistic practice. But with the loss of Brown Trinity, we have at least 3 problems to solve. One is we need a new casting pool of young actors for the main stage. The other is that we have to replace the optimism and the energy that young artists bring into our spaces, because that adds something. Oh, you didn't see it.
We can't see
Because that energy and optimism adds something very, very important to the public square. It really does. It's not optional, in my view, that we have people who still want to do this, and that we're proving to them that you can. I cannot tell you what a revelation it was to me to be studying here and see people who were married and had children and went to the grocery store and didn't, at least appear to me, to be crazy. Because I didn't understand that kind of life in the theater was possible. There aren't enough places where we're modeling the fact that there are so many different ways to build a life in the theater that doesn't have to, follow the sort of tropes of starving in New York or whatever it is, right? So people need to see that. And there are so many people who I'm teaching all the time in New York who would give their whatever to get a chance to do that. That hasn't gone away. There are still people who want to do this. That hasn't changed. It's just a question of whether or not partnering with a university and an MFA program is the best way for everybody to achieve that. Because what people are looking at now is, can I spare 3 years? Even if it's free, can I do 3 years? So doing something that's seasonal, where we're auditioning in the winter, we know who the cohort is, they make a commitment, we integrate their casting into the season planning, as well as the stuff that they're understudying, and then we create a curriculum that lets them have studio classes with all of the great teachers that are here and that I would hope to lead while they're doing that. When they do that, they might actually discover that they want to stay. I'll say more about that in a second, but if they don't, they don't. The third thing it would let us do, so it replaces the casting pool, it replaces the optimism and energy that are essential to the public square. And the final thing is that it restores the national reputation of a renowned training program, because this will get a lot of attention, right? The loss of BT means Trinity is losing a national narrative component that I think we have a responsibility to replace. Lots of different ways to do that. This doesn't have to do all that work, but it would go a long way towards doing that. This connects to one more thing that I want to talk. Oh, and here are 6 people who don't know they've been selected by me to do it. Hi. I see half of Gabrielle. He's very handsome, I swear. No, but these are people I've taught through Fiasco or through Breadloaf or through NYU, and they're the kind of people that would really respond to this sort of experience. They're really talented, they're really optimistic, they're enthusiastic, and they have been turned on by all of the ethos about rehearsal and audience engagement that I'm talking about. Okay, so then there's one more thing. I think that a lot of these people would choose to stick around. Why? Because one of the things that has changed tremendously in the 20 years since I was last living here. Oh, I live here now, by the way. I'll tell you that story in a second. But I took 20 years off to go do everything that I was doing. And one of the things that's really changed is that the theater scene in Providence and Rhode Island has expanded in ways that are totally amazing. There are more theater companies, but the companies that were existing are working at a much higher, more professionalized level. I just got to be a part of that at the GAM. I was in the production of Angels in America, and I was amazed at what they're doing. And I met Jeff Church, who of course runs Burbage Theater Company, and there's Wilbur, and there's a lot of really. And what's been happening over the years, for various reasons, is that there's been much more cross-pollination of the acting community. People who are members of Trinity's resident company have added to the reputation of those other theaters by working there, specifically at the GAM, and Burbage, and Wilbur, right? That's been a huge coup for that. And it's kind of gone the other way too, right? Trinity's acting company has become less insular, and so there's more local people who are being hired here. So what I want to do, because I have very good relationships with Tony and Jeff, I don't know Josh yet, but I'd like to, is to put together some kind of dynamic photo shoot, probably with Jeff in the front. Like every line in Angels in America was about how handsome he was and how annoying I was. I wouldn't be Trinity's tallest artist. Oh, I told her. But because I have good relations with them, what I would say is that it's very clear that we now have a community of theaters. Yeah. We shouldn't pretend that each other don't exist. We should not be calling each other and strategizing how we plan seasons together. Mm-hmm. We should be talking about this openly and transparently. It should not be seen as a crime for somebody who's associated with one institution to work at another. We need to figure that out. And the way we figure that out is by getting American Theater or TCG or the New York Times or Playbill or somebody to tell the story that Providence is now a theater town and that it's going to be like Chicago was in the 70s. It's going to be a place where there are multiple theaters of multiple professionalism, and that whether you're a non-equity person who's just starting out or an equity actor who can't get hired in the big pond but who's got the goods, you can come here and people are going to hire you. That's what actors need. They need to know that they're going to get work. So this cohort is just one way of putting together a specific group of people. I think this is about the number of people we could put in the house that apparently Trinity owns. Yeah. This is news to me. That's incredible. So this is about the number of people I think we could do. But it doesn't mean that local people could not join this exact same cohort. Yeah. If we didn't need to house them. Mm-hmm. So that's another way of saying, like, they're all going to get training at the same time. And then we're mixing people who've already been here. Because this company has always been a mix of homegrown people who grew up in the region and went to Rick or URI and invested here, right, as those theaters are. Or it's people who did a show here and said, oh my God, how do I keep doing this? I'm all in, I'm becoming a company member, right? And we still need both narratives. We still need both ways of finding people to enrich, expand, and revitalize the company, and not just the resident company people who are named, but the broader community of actors so that there's more energy in the entire story of who's doing theater. Here's an example of a regional connection that I think is very interesting. If we can go to the next slide. Okay. I want to forge new partnerships with local artists and creators who have a built-in following, which again will help build the kind of civic pride, and who can bring new patrons into our community. So this is Daisy Egan. Daisy Egan won the Tony Award when she was 11 years old for The Secret Garden. So if we were to do that play, she might be interested in helping do something related to that, like, I don't know, being in it, or doing a concert as an ancillary event. But the thing is that what she's best known for now, even though she continues acting, is that she has a podcast called Strange and Unexplained Shit, or something like that, which has 30 million listens since 2021. That's an audience I'm guessing is not automatically hooked into what Trinity is doing. But during the pandemic, she moved to Warwick, Rhode Island. So she lives, I don't know how they chose that, but she lives here. So she does a few different things. We could host a live show of her podcast. She does that. We host a live show on the Chase of One. We could create an opportunity if she was up for it, that I could work on it with her, and we could adapt her podcast into a solo play that she could do with Dowling as part of our programming. Or we could connect her to the production of Secret Garden. Those are just 3 starting points of what it might need to initiate a conversation with somebody like this. And then we just have to widen that lens a little bit to get into Southern New England and maybe into other New England and say, we've got those people here. It doesn't even have to involve going into different territory to find people who might build an audience that we don't know. To me, this is part of inclusion and accessibility. It's saying, she's got a big following. Who might come here to see her do something, right? And she's got the goods. So that's something I'd be curious about figuring out how to maximize. Another example I had is that, and the reason I mentioned the one-off live taping or the concert, the cabaret night or something that we use as a fundraiser, is that it doesn't have to run for 32 performances. We're going to have to figure out ways to have revenue-generating, income-generating events in here that are one-offs, concerts, stand-up comedy, things that can fill 500 or 600 seats for a one-night thing that becomes very useful for us, and it keeps the public square more open and more engaged and gives people more ways to come to the theater, so that if they see something here, they might say, maybe I'll come back and see that play. You know, so then we get them in multiple ways. Another example of this, my wife serves on the board of the Providence Children's Film Fest, which is a really cool thing that happens every February. I'd love us to become a host for that and get kids coming in to see movies that are for them. And then we say, oh, you know, and by the way, we do theater programming that's designed for kids this age too. So I think we can be a hub for all kinds of artistic activity. We are the biggest arts institution in Rhode Island. So what are we doing with that? How do people know that we're not just doing our own stuff, but we're sort of like hosting other kinds of interesting artistic stuff that comes prepackaged? And how can we put the production department in a position to know how to be ready for that kind of performing stuff? Great. So it's a 3-season vision for Trinity Rep. The Big Tent delivers audience volume and excitement. The lab invests in Trinity's artistic future by teaching us how we want to develop things. And development is not just about new plays. We have to develop old plays too. The partnerships that build national reputation and scale, and the legacy that creates new training programs and relationships. So my hope is that the Trinity Rep of 2030 will be defined by strategic partnerships, a thriving talent pipeline, but with the latter icon. and really big, really bold storytelling that galvanizes our audience and writes the thrilling next chapter of this very storied American theater. So who the last time? So thank you very much. And I'm really excited. I want to be clear, this is not the headshot I would choose if I was the artistic director. It's no need to shape. Probably more glasses and less airbrushing. Here more legitimate. Thanks, I really appreciate it. Not even in jest.
I don't have time for it to just like one.
Questions? Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I thought this was much longer than I thought.
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to do this off, but I decided you were on a roll. Questions? Comment? Yes. Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Really excited about the idea of, you know, revitalizing like an apprenticeship for actors, wondering how you see that interacting with our apprentices
Yeah.
for production. Like, are they part of the same cohort? Do they get to work on stuff together?
Yeah.
And then housing, obviously, is that a paid program are you hoping for? What is the support we're getting financially to any people, or is it just based on which shows they're in and which shows they understudy? Curious.
Those are really good questions, and I don't know the financial details or the housing details yet. My hope is that cohort feels like one group of people that are all working together, and I think they should also be able to make their own stuff, and that's where the production roles and the different non-acting and directing roles would have a collaborative space in there. But also, one thing that came up in the production staff meeting is that we need a space in which to train people for production roles. So I'm hoping that actually they can also receive training that is much more specific and not just the apprenticeship. I think that's going to be the key piece of it. When I was at Fiasco, we created the free training initiative, which was a 3-week classical theater conservatory experience that was free. And we fundraise for that, and people get galvanized about finding ways to support that. I would hope that if we're paying people for the work they do on the main stage, and we're saying that they can be housed, that they can figure out what the other questions might be about what they need to make that work financially for a year. But I don't know, maybe there's more resources to tap for that. Maybe that's a part of where the ongoing support from Brown can be directed to. I think there's ways to think about that to make it appealing, but I don't think there's a way to make this program tuition-based and have people do it. So there's gonna have to be some kind of component, and I don't want it to feel like it's work study. I don't think that's right. That was the ATL apprentice company model, was they were mostly like sweeping the stage and then they'd like come through rehearsal sometime. And it was more like the Williamstown apprenticeship model. That's a little bit exploited. That's not what I'm talking about. No, people wouldn't go for that.
Other questions? Hi, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. I mean,
I really appreciate your thinking about and the development of new work. I think that's really important. I see in the materials that you have shared with us, you mentioned the Brown Arts components, the BAI, the CAC, and TAPS.
Yeah.
BAI used to be, doesn't exist anymore. But you don't mention Rights and Reason Theater. You don't include Rights and
that's
Reason
interesting.
Theater. And I was wondering what you're thinking about that. And to tag on to that question is what you're thinking about work from here going to, how important is it to go to Broadway?
I don't know. Well, I'll answer your second question first. Is that all right? I don't know how important it is for our stuff to go to Broadway. I just know that other regional theaters do it. And it becomes an income generating source for them. And I will say every theater that is doing that has what we call enhancement funds attached to that show. There are already commercial producers who are already financially funding the nonprofit development stages of that show. They don't get involved afterwards. So what you have, the only way that works is if there's enhancement funds and somebody wants to come here and do it. Now, I think we could make that happen here if it served our programming needs and wasn't just about playing to the people in New York who will then take it seriously. But it's not something I would rule out. I do think that our shows can go to other nonprofit off-Broadway theaters, and I do think our shows can go to international venues where there's a different kind of focus and attention on them. But getting Trinity shows involved into the commercial space would be a massive change for the revenue question that we need to solve. So I'm not going to shy away from commercial opportunities. And I have a little bit of experience in the commercial world that would help me navigate that. And a lot of people with a network with a lot of people who have a lot of experience in that. For example, I was in 2 Broadway shows directed by Alex Timbers, who did Moulin Rouge and Beetlejuice and a number of other shows. What I've learned is that directors in the commercial world are also producers. They are always pitching the idea. They're always creating the model of why that thing would work before it happens. So those are conversations I hope to have and say, like, is there anything you would do here at the scale that would work here that would be a first stop for something that you would then take somewhere else? And we'd be in the royalty pool, you know, as an originating theater. That's very important. So those are conversations I think we should have. I don't think we should take that off the map, either from a sort of aesthetic snobbery standpoint, or from the sense of like, well, no one would want to do it with us. I don't think that's true. To answer your second question, I'm surprised I left that off, and thank you for bringing my attention to that. I did actually study with Elmo Terry Morgan when I was a student at Brown, and I recently saw the renovated building. The Rights and Reason is, and I spent wandering in the theater and spent some time chatting with folks there. It's really extraordinary. So I think that's a totally worthy question: is what would be useful for them? How can we be useful to Rights and Reason is the question I would ask. And how does that legacy of Elmo and Lloyd Richards and those people, how does that have its test now? What does that mean for us to partner with them? The exciting thing about the BAI is that they're not beholden to any departments. And and so you have more flexibility of how you can propose both courses and programming. And also, I know a lot of the people who are on the production staff there, and they're a crackerjack. I mean, they really know how to do stuff, and they like working with me, and they like doing events that make them feel like they're actually making art and not just sitting in a box, trying to figure out how to move the walls around. So I think there's real opportunities to make stuff there. Perhaps this apprentice company cohort becomes something that gets to be involved in those spaces and take advantage of those resources. But I'm open to anything. And I just want to say personally, I have no animosity towards Brown. I am one of the enthusiastic alumni of Brown, and I have a good relationship with Chris Paxson and others there. And I would be enthusiastic about figuring out how to make it work.
And as a tagline, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed your work at the GAM and Angels.
Thanks for that. Thank you. See what I mean? Thank you. I was very lucky to be there. Thanks.
Other questions? This has been so much fun. Really, thank you.
I'm so sorry that I spoke at such length.
No, it was terrific.
Thanks.
Really, I went like that.
Oh, good.
Thank
Thank you.
I can't remember if they went by.
One more question, if
Yeah.
it's time.
Of course.
Is there time?
Sure, of course, yeah.
What is your thinking about, what's labeled as non-traditional casting? Given the current DEIA policy?
Trinity was a pioneer in that space. And I don't think that legacy should be overlooked. I have the biography of Adrian Hall in my bag. It's really powerful to read the stories of people like Ed Hall and Barbara Meek, and to hear what the as you say, so-called non-traditional casting opportunities they had here did for their artistry, and what that did for Trinity. So I think there are reasons why what we can say is that everybody should get to do things. There are no limits to what anyone should be able to be a part of, unless the event of the story is the identity of that artist or character. And those are the things that we keep in balance. When does someone's identity or lived experience or the way they present matter for the content of the story? And if the story is not engaging that question, then how does it get more interesting when a diverse group of people take on the telling of that story? That's my basic philosophy of the casting component. And as I've said in other spaces, I guess I'll just say it here, the hardest letter of EDIA is always the E. Because diversity, it has a way of being pursued, and inclusion has a way of being pursued, and accessibility has a way of being pursued, and you can do all of that with joy and openness and lots of different perspectives. And the challenge is always about what does it mean for that pursuit of all of those things to result in something that is equitable? Or is it just about the equity of offers or the equity of opportunities? And so that's a complicated term that I would want to spend more time with more voices and more perspectives trying to define and understanding them. And to lean on the experts who are already on the leadership team here about how they think about that. Because that's something I'm still developing my point of view about.
Last question.
I was intrigued by your thoughts about collaboration.
Yeah.
Particularly with GAM, which I think, and I don't know if you agree, is sort of the closest to us, even though they have different aesthetic. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on how we might work more closely. We talked about actors going back and forth, because obviously there's a limited theater audience. We're both trying to appeal to the same audience. They tend to do better for people from South County because it's convenient and there's parking and they don't fear going to the
Yeah.
theater.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, my feeling is that we need to be, how can I say this politely? We should be running the show of the institutions that are in this town. We are the biggest. We should be doing the highest quality work. We should be doing the boldest, bravest programming. And I'm not willing to cede that positionality in the conversation to anybody. We will crush our competitors. We're all good friends. No, I don't want that. What I think maybe I might slightly disagree with your premise is that we're not actually competing for the same audience. If somebody goes to see something there, they're more likely to come see us.
Right.
If they come see us, they're more likely. We just need people to be seeing the theater. The problem is for Trinity to just be left out of that equation in the conversation. If there's a perception that we're not doing stuff that is at that level or compelling or for whatever reason, I don't want to assume any of these narratives. I'm just saying. So it's not so much about figuring out like what would a co-production with the GAM be, as much as it is how can I get on the phone and say, are we thinking about doing the same plays next year? How do we resolve that problem? Right? How are you thinking about putting together a season? How can we help supplement that so that we're sort of helping each other figure out how to not overlap our missions and cannibalize the same audience? But we have to be running the show.
Now, so we have a reception afterwards, by the way, next door. So any questions you have of Ben individually,
Let's chat.
he's gonna stay till he drops.
Well, we have to be.
No,
No, you want the reception.